Moana 2. Released November 27, 2024. Directed by David G. Derrick Jr., Jason Hand, and Dana Ledoux Miller. Written by Jared Bush, Dana Ledoux Miller, and Beck Smith. Starring Ollie Cravalho, Dwayne Johnson, and Hualalai Chung. Rotten Tomatoes score, 65%. Metacritic, 57. IMDb, 7.1. MPA rating PG. Welcome back to Real Reviews. Like always, I am your host, Lee. Today we are talking about Moana 2, the sequel to the 2016 Moana. An important caveat to this movie is that it spent at least a few years being developed as a Disney Plus limited series. Then at the start of 2024, it was announced that it would be a movie instead. This mattered and the movie shows it, but hey, let's talk about it. So purely by the nature of this movie, it works within the genre. It is an animated Disney princess musical. But the story is a mess, as well as the pacing. This movie really has just 3 locations, each of which is clearly assigned to an act in the movie. This is part that really makes it obvious that there was much more story that was written, because the second act is a slog, to the point to where my young niece was so bored she walked out with my partner for a few minutes just to get away from it. How does it make it obvious there was more story? Because at the end of the second act, they are literally just warped to the third act. If I had to guess, I would say that the part that serves as the middle of this movie just didn't exist in the original story, or the last bit of it wasn't there. Likely the series would have been one episode for one island. So they shoved this area in. It was largely boring with pretty basic songs to fill in the time. On that note, the music in this movie seems to be a wild step down in quality. An important note for any musical targeted at kids is that the songs are easy to remember and catchy. I couldn't tell you any of the songs. This is also kind of the problem with the side characters. I know what they do, but again, I couldn't tell you their names. None of the new characters have the time to grow or really overcome any issues. Basically, they get a sailing montage and a song and boom, they are a crew. Kind of the worst part about that is that only one of the new characters really does anything of note. Okay, but the bad guy has to be interesting, right? Not really. Nalo, the god of storms, is just a storm that barely does much in an interesting way, and his reason for being the bad guy is basically just, he doesn't like humans. That is it, a very shallow justification for the story. In the first movie, we get at least some depth into why Te Ka is a villain, and they actively and obviously act against Moana and Maui by throwing fireballs and attacking them. But Nalo is a storm. He uses tornadoes and lightning, but you don't really see him do it. They just appear, so it is easy to just forget about him and think the final location is just in the middle of a massive supernatural storm. There isn't really anything new and interesting with Moana or Maui as we move through the story. They are largely just who we had at the end of the first movie. The animation is yet again absolutely stunning. The scenery is top-notch. You can see the details in fabrics, wood, and clay. That takes tons of detailed work and time to get these things to look right. The voice acting is also pretty good. Most of the cast seems to be from the New Zealand area, but a few of them have accents that are a touch distracting, but luckily those characters don't have enough lines to really have a lasting impact. Did I find this movie enjoyable? Not really, but this isn't a really bad movie. I didn't leave feeling like I wasted my money or time, but I did leave feeling disappointed. I did start to doze off in the middle section, which isn't something that I have had happen in many years. I was just bored. So, like I mentioned, this movie was intended to be a Disney Plus show, but then was just reworked into a movie. This seems like a money thing. The show wouldn't have added a lot of extra subscriber base that would have covered the production cost. So I think that is what made them want to change it to a movie, because ticket sales are better than Disney Plus subscriptions. So the average movie ticket is about $11. The studio will get about 60% of that. I had 4 tickets, which means they made about $26, or about 2 months worth of Disney Plus, and I already have Disney Plus, so they get to double dip. The bad part about this is that they made a worse product to make double the money. Releasing it around the holidays when kids will be on break was also pretty smart, as with any amount of luck, they can get more consistent ticket sales. Next up is spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, please come back and finish watching later. If you are stopping here, thank you so much for watching. So the core premise of this film is that Moana gets the title of Taudai and must take up the quest of one of her ancestors to find a lost island that connects all of the people of the ocean together. Without it, they cannot find one another or the areas where the other groups live. Nalo is an angry storm god who sinks and obscures this island in a massive storm, because he thinks that keeping humans apart will make him more powerful. That is the entirety of our explanation of why he does what he does. We don't know why he needs more power, or why humans being able to unite undermines that power. He hates Maui simply because Maui likes humans. So Moana leaves her island again, apparently between the end of the first movie and the start of this one. Her people just stop sailing again. When she leaves, she takes a crew of 3 people, none of which are trained sailors, 2 of which don't seem to be particularly useful. So we have Kale, the grumpy old farmer, Moni, the historian and resident Maui fanboy, and lastly Lodo, the shipwright. Just from those brief descriptions, I am sure you know who is the one useful one. Later on they add in a Kakamora named Kotu, and they are usefully for a few things, but only in the second act, and then they are completely useless. In Act 2, along with Kotu, we get Maui added in, and he is obviously fairly useful. So in Act 2, the worst part of the movie is that they are trapped in this giant clam where Matangi is holding Maui. At the start of the movie, it seems like Matangi is a loyal henchwoman to Nalo, but as soon as Moana gets there, she just helps them and sends them on their way. Like very literally, Matangi for no real reason changes from being loyal to not, and then opens up fast travel to the island. One thing that really bothered me was the simplicity of the solution to the problem of the island being cursed. It isn't that they have to find it. It isn't that it has to be pulled up from the sea. It is just that as soon as a human touches the island, the curse is broken. Why is this the limit of the curse? There is so much story missing here. A common thing when it comes to kids' movies is kids deserve good stories too, and this is a shining example of why people are saying that this movie is a glaring example of using a previously established film to make a quick buck. The opening weekend box office is a clear example that it worked. So I rated this movie a 4 out of 8 or 5 out of 10 stars. I can't reasonably recommend this movie unless you have children and they are obsessed with it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I tend to have 2 videos out per week. This week won't be an example of that, but it should pick up next week. Until next time.